This is the Conan's 80th birthday celebration panel. There will be no removing of clothing during the birthday party. My name is Mark Finn. I am the current Howard biographer until somebody else writes a book. Rusty? Anyone? Second edition of Blood and Thunder is now out in a limited edition, signed and numbered edition. There are only around 30 copies or so left. If you're interested in one, I'm sure that somebody from the Howard Foundation will make you a deal, and you can actually pick it up here in Cross Plains and have it delivered into your hot little hands. They're going fast. I also put a book together with Chris Gruber last year called Dreams in the Fire. There are only 3 copies of that left at the Howard House gift shop, and they are also going fast. It is full of artwork, or not artwork, poetry and stories by many people who are here. It's a wonderful autographed souvenir for you if you don't have anything for us to sign here in the huckstering. With me on the panel is Paul Sammon and Al Harron. Paul is...
I'll introduce myself.
Okay.
I'm learning.
Okay. All right, I'm passing the mic now.
All right. But first, a word from Al.
You fiendish Hollywood types. Just so we all know who we are here. Ka namaka lajarama.
There we go.
Okay? Okay, no serpent.
Right on.
I knew it was Ed.
Well, hello. My name is Al Harron. I'm all the way from Scotland, and I kind of like Robert E. Howard. Don't know about you guys, but I found him very impressive. But what is most compelling to me about Howard is that there's just so much to him that had yet to be discovered by the layperson. Because when you go up to a person on the street, if they know who Robert E. Howard is, they'll most likely say, oh, the Conan guy. And to think that the Conan stories only account for a percentage of all the Howard stories there are is amazing. And even so, the Conan stories are most well known for a reason. And I should probably introduce myself actually rather than anything else. But anyway, I'm Al Harron. I'm a beardy upstart from Scotland who's been coming here for 3 years. And I ran the Conan movie blog, which was the premier amateur news site for the Conan film, which came out last year, which you may or may not have missed at the theatres. And there was also, or seen, I'm not saying anything. And I also run the blog that Time Forgot, which is a vaguely Robert E. Howard centric website, but also includes Howard's favourite authors, Conan Doyle, Burroughs, Haggard, that sort of like, and Dinosaurs and Transformers. But basically, I really like Conan, really like Robert E. Howard, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing on this panel with these two guys, but I was invited, and it would be churlish of me to turn it down. So I now turn to my esteemed colleague, Paul Sammon.
Oh, thank you, Al. Those of you who haven't read Al's blogs, I highly recommend them. They're very well written, and they're always provocative. They're always entertaining. Knowing laughs out there.
We brought Al onto the brogue.
There we go. Generally speaking, I'm Paul Sammon. This is my 6th year, I guess, coming to this. And I first came across Robert E. Howard in 1959 when I was a 9-year-old boy living at a small naval air station that no longer exists in the Philippines called Sangley Point. And I came across a copy of the Gnome Press Sword of Conan and pulled it out, and I read Red Nails at the age of 9. And it warped my little mind for the rest of my life. Fortunately, as someone who grew up loving films and books, I entered into those careers professionally in the 1970s. I worked on over 100 motion pictures. Including things like RoboCop and Starship Troopers, and was around for the making of Blade Runner, one of my books. I've written about 33, I think, now. It's very well known. It's called Future Noir, the making of Blade Runner. But more germane to this group, Dark Horse was kind enough to publish a history of Conan called Conan the Phenomenon that I did in 2007, which is a coffee table art book that has 75 years of Conanian illustrations, everything up until that point. And I basically started in the Conan direction, but then because of the times that I grew up in, I was lucky enough to get the Marvel Comics when they first came out, the Lancer paperbacks with the Frazetta covers, the Frazetta cover Edgar Rice Burroughs books that came out in the early 60s. Then I got the first issues of Amra, and also started to realize that there was some serious literature that Howard was doing, and I became kind of a completist. And was very fortunate enough to meet Glenn Lord in 1977 for the first time when they were putting together what was called Conan Properties Incorporated to get the first Conan movie made with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I then worked on and met actually Glenn and his wife Luann in southern Spain when they visited the set. Also worked on Conan the Destroyer in Mexico City for Universal Pictures at the time. And but basically I'm just another fan. And you know, this is just such an honor because Conan has been a through line in my entire life, except for the first 9 years. And so to be here to celebrate both his creator and the creation is just really, really an honor for me. So this, I think, is going to be real free form. I mean, I'll give it over to Mark. Mark and I can talk your ears off, and I'm sure Al can as well. But I think it'd be fun to make this as interactive as possible. But first, I'll give it to Mark to see what he has to say.
Well, I wanted to briefly talk about, I mean, obviously we're here talking about Conan 80 years after the fact because in so many ways, you know, not only is this the most visible aspect of Howard's career, but I think that some of the absolute best Robert E. Howard stories are also Conan stories. And when Conan is great, Conan is phenomenal. So there's an interesting. Did you like the plug? That was a good one. Something I brought up in the expanded edition of Blood and Thunder, which is something I didn't get a chance to talk about in 2006, is that Conan was very much a commercial construct created by Robert. I say that in no way meaning to disparage the artisanship that went into the making of that. In fact, I think it's all the more fascinating that Howard was intentionally trying to come up with a character, a recurring character for Weird Tales. I think he was deliberately targeting and making an effort to go after Seabury Quinn's slot in the magazine, trying to overthrow Jules de Grandin, Seabury Quinn's character. And so I think he made a serious study, and this is based on the fact that we know he did it in all the other magazines that he wrote in. You know, he would always try these sort of experimental stories, there was a reason for going to Weird Tales at this time. Most of the other markets, in fact, fight stories and action stories had been suspended because of the Great Depression. He needed steady work, and the thing about Weird Tales is Weird Tales ridiculously managed to survive through all this and did not go on to hiatus. It remained financially shaky, but I think Howard was thinking he had the longest track record with this magazine. His whole idea was, if I can come up with a regular, steady selling character, a concept that they're going to want more of, like I did with Sailor Steve Costigan for Fiction House, and like other people have done in the magazines. If I can come up with something like that, then I'd really have something. And I won't go into, in the interest of time and deference to my other two panelists, I won't go into the whole thing. But what's significant about this, the two things that I want to kind of throw out there that are so significant is his where somebody else would just come up with a character, a situation, and maybe even an invented city, and go to work. And he could have done that. He did it with Sailor Steve Costigan. The ports of call mean very little in those boxing stories. There's just the backdrop by which the fight and the double cross and all the shenanigans take place. He could have easily done something like that. And Weird Tales was his go-to guy. If there was another market that wouldn't buy the story, he was pretty sure he could add something or take something away and sell it to Farnsworth Wright. So he really understood this stuff. With all that in mind, he sat down and he created his imagined Hyborian age. And the notion of this fictional piece of real estate that existed 14,000 years in this sort of gap in our recorded history is significant, and it's something that he has not really ever gotten a lot of credit for. This is sophisticated world building. Howard was basically engaging in meta myth making when he did this. And the idea that he was basically walking back modern man to this time period where the things that became our modern myths and legends came from. And people like Sprague de Camp never understood that the reason why the continent was called Vindia was because he intentionally meant it to become India. And the reason why these names were so similar, that was on purpose. It wasn't that he was being lazy. He was literally, maybe even clumsily, trying to dial it back a couple of notches. And so Conan then becomes one of the early templates for the guys that would later become these massive hero kings. Very similar to what Michael Crichton did with Eaters of the Dead. He tried to basically come up with a realistic treatment for what would become the Beowulf story, and that was what Howard was doing. And it's something that and it's in the letters. It's in his conversations to Lovecraft. It's in the Hyborian Age. He makes it very clear that he's trying to go back to an imagined time period and fill in these gaps in our recorded history. This is not much different than what Tolkien did with Lord of the Rings, although he went a linguistic route instead of an anthropological route. But it's the same. It's just as sophisticated a world building technique, and it's something that's never really gotten the kind of attention that it deserves. But it's one of the reasons that why those stories have a little bit of everything and continue to engage and continue to be a kind of a hook for us because it's such a rich playground, and it's virtually untapped. It's also unfortunately why people think, this was so much fun reading. I'll bet I can write a Conan story that will be just as good as what Robert E. Howard did. And that's where our troubles began. But anyways, I wanted to bring that out.
I want to ask Al a question, because we just heard a very interesting explication on the literary prism of the Conan character. And yet, 80 years later, here he has survived through all kinds of different media, including graphic art, television, cartoons, feature films, radio, you name it. He's been in it. And Al, what does Conan mean to you? How about that for a question?
I'll tell you what drew me to Howard's Conan.
There we go.
When I was growing up as a lad in Scotland, my first experience with Conan the franchise was the animated series, Conan the Adventurer. Not the best start, However, even there with the little phoenix and the needle the phoenix,
yes.
Even with all that, there were still snippets. There were sprinkled throughout little tiny details. In the very first episode, Conan's grandfather is regaling the young Cimmerian about how the thunder in the clouds reminded him of the 5,000 shining knights of Poitain rampaging across the golden fields. That was catnip to me because I grew up on classic adventure, Alexander Dumas, H. Haggard, Conan Doyle, all those sorts of authors, Robert Louis Stevenson, and so on and so on. And it was these tiny little things which captured my imagination. Not so much anything else, although I did like the sword play and the action and adventure, but I left Conan alone when I stopped watching Conan the Adventurer. And then, when I was about 16, I found Gollancz's Fantasy Masterworks. And my first Conan story, well, my first Howardian document was the Hyborian Age itself. Completely blew me away for all the reasons Mark said, because here was a well thought out anthropological discourse on the history of a people, and it was never intended for publication. This was notes for his stories. He wasn't writing this to publish it in deals. He wrote this to help aid, build verisimilitude, one of my favourite words that I have to stop using, but or just not use as often. But he built it up to make it real, and that is what really drew me to it. And Conan specifically, my first Conan story was The Tower of the Elephant. Now, you talk about Conan stories that completely shatter the illusions of Conan, the pop culture icon, the big, stupid, meat-headed lug that goes about killing sorcerers and bedding wenches and whatnot. Here is a Conan who is referred to as sitting on the ledge at meetings between Zamorian philosophers and listening to them talk about the universe and existentialism for hours on end. Conan the Barbarian, listening to philosophers of his own free will, not trapped in a cage and being fed philosophies of Sung or anything like that. But he went out and sought it, and that's when I realised this is what Conan means to me. He is the ultimate self-made man, in that his goal in life is to become the best at everything he can be. He sees life of piracy. He becomes a captain, one of the most notorious pirates of the age. Becomes a mercenary, soon becomes a general. He sees a kingship. I'll be the mightiest kingdom of the age. He was the mightiest king of the age. And that seems to be the driving goal of Conan, to be this ultimate Renaissance man. And he succeeded, certainly, but it's this idea that Conan learns everything there is to learn. He learns languages, he learns histories, he learns paleontology, because you need these things to survive in the world. You need to know languages and cultures so that you don't get your head chopped off. But the mere fact that he chooses to go out and learn everything really spoke to this studious young lad. So, anyways.
Interesting.